All right, y'all. Welcome back, BirthFit community. We got lots of ladies in here. There might be some gentlemen sneaking a listen, some husbands, partners that know what's good. Y'all, we have an awesome guest speaker today, Mackenzie Momper, and she's known as the Well-fed Mama Method on social media. And I originally met her because she went through our programs. She went through our coach course program. So this is super cool to kind of go full circle and observe her experience and stepping into motherhood, not bouncing back. So I am stoked about what she's going to share nutrition wise, and she's been a wealth of information for her immediate community within the coach course. And I love what she's putting out now. She's really, you get a lot of downloads as a new mom, right? And I feel like you probably got the whole vision for your new business. And here it is, it's coming out. So I'm going to turn it over to her before I say anything else. And then we'll check back in for questions and answers at the end. And if you want to put a question down in the chat box so you don't forget, please do so. I know I got some questions lined up if nothing else comes, but here we go. Let's get rolling. Mackenzie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to chat a little bit before I share my presentation. You all can call me Mac without the K if you would like to. But it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much, Lindsey and the BirthFit team for inviting me. And I want to kind of set the stage for our time together today because we're going to get into the thick of it today, I feel like. We've obviously been giving birth for a very long time. And the challenge is that in our current era, everything around motherhood has been automatized, systematized, commercialized, commoditized, and streamlined, just like everything else in the world, it feels like. I mean, look at us right now. We're on Zoom. Everything is at our fingertips. And motherhood, in my opinion, motherhood has been stripped of its reverence in many ways. And the consequence of this is that we've lost touch with our innate ability as life givers, as those who are able to create and bring life into the world. And we've lost touch with that generational wisdom that was passed down with honor and being exchanged in our communities and what we used to call our villages. And we've been led to believe that the ultimate goal is to get back to normal as soon as possible versus expanding deeply into our new existence as mothers. But it doesn't have to be this way. And today, above all else, I want you all to have the biggest takeaway, which is that it is possible to flourish before, during, and after pregnancy. And I'm going to show you how. As I present today, as Lindsey just said, anytime that you feel called to comment, add in questions, please put it in the chat. I'll be kind of looking for common themes, and obviously we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end just to go through those. And I want you to know that you can count on three main benefits from today: learning what Western birth philosophy doesn't want us to know, and what you will not hear in 99% of the birth classes. You're going to have a foundational toolkit to be able to flourish throughout your journey from that maidenhood to motherhood. And then, as a final bonus, I'm going to be giving you all today who have attended my first sneak peek at my new website and then some of my freebies. I have not released this out anywhere else yet. And I thought today would be a beautiful time to be able to do that. So with that, I'm gonna share and go over. Oh, Lindsey, may I have permission to share? Thank you so much. Well, you all know that I now created this in Canva.
Canva is where all entrepreneurs begin.
It's amazing. Yeah,
I
it's
still
amazing.
am.
Okay. Right. So this is my second baby, I guess you could say, Well-fed Mama Method. And what we're going to talk about today. So some of the common themes. I'm going to briefly share a little bit about my story, but today is all about giving you all information and what is going to be best to set you up for postpartum. So, we're going to go through postpartum truths and planning, 4 pillars, and then talking through postpartum depression or depletion and some healing timelines. So, a little bit about my story. I have an almost 2-year-old son at this time, which is absolutely amazing. And being almost 2 years postpartum, I can say truthfully, because we're still breastfeeding and we're slowly weaning, it's just been a natural process, which has been very hard on me. Um, but it has been absolutely amazing. And I feel like it has taken me almost 22 months to piece everything back together. And that is going to be something we're going to be talking about in the healing timeline process. But I did do the BIRTHFIT course during my first year of motherhood, which was actually amazing and super serendipitous because I did the BIRTHFIT program during my pregnancy to prep myself for my labor and then ultimately to set myself up for postpartum. I've been an athlete almost my whole life, and that is something that I feel really took precedence when it came to me planning for my pregnancy and my birth and labor and now into postpartum. Um, I've been in the health and wellness space for about 13 years now, and I've worn many different hats. And today I truly help women to flourish in that pre pregnancy, so that fertility phase, pregnancy, and postpartum, because all of those are such an important piece of our chapter and puzzle of our lives so that we can flourish beyond that and into even perimenopause and menopause. Um, and my mom is one of my biggest heroes in that. Seeing her flourish, she is now 72 years old and still kicking butt. And she gave birth to me a month before she turned 40. So the whole concept of geriatric, not a part of my world, and that is something that I feel also I might touch on today, as far as age and what that actually means to be able to flourish. So some postpartum truths. Just listed a few here, and I'm going to kind of get into the nitty gritty with all of these. So we know that we're all individuals and that every journey is unique, especially when it comes to postpartum. Our setup is different, who we have as our support system. If you work for somebody else, your time off, what does that look like? How does it look like to call on your village? And actually knowing that your experience is unique and taking that in stride with not comparing yourself to anybody else, especially on social media. I think that is one of the biggest killers in motherhood nowadays. In our health and support, notice I said starts before birth. So this includes mom and dad putting in that time and effort to be healthy. That also includes setting boundaries with your family early on of what you do and do not want as far as help and care. And the whole body, whole mind healing piece. I'm sure Lindsey has touched on this, but healing doesn't just involve your body, it involves your emotions, your hormones, and your nervous system. These are all part of that beautiful circle that you are entering in. Your recovery impacts your whole family. So I wanted to put this in here because I did not have my immediate, ultimate postpartum setup. My son needed help breathing, and I had a natural birth, but he came out lifeless and breathless, and we knew we needed some assistance. Here, insert Western medicine, but we had hard boundaries with that. But I could not have done that without my husband, first and foremost, taking stride, being calm, my amazing midwife and doula, and then my community who showed up, who brought us real good food when we were driving back and forth to the NICU, because that was the one thing that I could control. And I'm so thankful for that because in order for us as women to give and be the givers and, the I guess we're the neck. The men are the head of the family. We're the neck, and we get to turn it anyway. That's actually a quote from a movie for those of you who know that. But it's so important to have that support and your recovery. You need to be able to take that time to slow down and actually rest in postpartum. And your timeline is on your own. So I wanted to get a little bit more into timelines because It's very interesting. Postpartum isn't that first 6 weeks and then, oh, you're cleared. You can go back and do everything that you want. The 6 week appointment is specifically for the average uterus shrinking back down to its normal size. So, anytime somebody clears you for things, if any of you have had kiddos, you kind of know the drill. This might look similar in a hospital setting, in a birth center setting, or even a home visit from a midwife. They're all doing their best, but they're only doing what we've been taught. Um, they're not asking you about your support system. They're not asking you about nutrition. They're not providing insight to an HTMA test, which I'll get into in a little bit. And they are going to give you the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, so the EPDS. This is the most common screening. It's 10 questions, and it is multiple choice. This was developed in 1987 by John L. Cox, Dr. Jennifer Holden, and Dr. Ruth Zagofsky at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. But the problem with this is that it's only focusing on mood and it's not focusing on any other areas of postpartum recovery. Like I said, they're not asking you how you're feeling it face to face. They're having you fill this out, and half the time women aren't actually filling it out accurately. I put some of these stats on here because I think this plays a big role in this and how rampant postpartum depression is and why nutrition is a key piece of helping with postpartum depression. So 2024, we got a D plus as a country from the Maternal Mental Health State Report Card. That's not good. Any of us who have ever taken a test, that is terrible rating. Around 20% of our US moms, that's 600K women per year, are experiencing mental health disorders. 50% are going undiagnosed, 75% never get treated. I think about this a lot when I think about my mom and then my grandma. My grandma had 13 kids, my mom's mom. And women in that era, if they didn't have this help. And some of them turned to drugs or alcohol, unfortunately, and some of them even took their life. And it was literally a cry for help. And this is where we need to be doing better, because the 6 week appointment, you're dropped off. Even our friends and family kind of drop off after the 6 weeks. And if this is your second, third, fourth kiddo, there is less and less help when it actually needs to be the opposite, because we need our village even more as we're expanding our own family. A little bit of postpartum planning. I gave a hefty list here because I think it's important. We plan all these amazing things. So a baby shower, getting all that planned, all the onesies, burp rags, you name it, the special trash can for the diapers and all of that. My husband and I always joke about this, but we were like, the two things that you ultimately need are like a diaper setup, whatever that may be, and a car seat. Everything else is going to fall into place. But like I said, we're kind of commercializing everything. So what does it look like to kind of change that narrative? I put on here a little honey money for parents. This is specifically a quote unquote baby list for new parents. It is absolutely fantastic. You could put things on there like a postpartum fund, if you will. So you can use that for anything from body work for you and baby, massages for even dad, because he's taking on a lot as well. It's different than mom, but he also needs to be thought about a little bit too for support. Food, or like food money, or prepping that. And I put on here, fill the freezer party. This is something that I do for a lot of clients and something that I did. My best friend who's actually watching Leo today, she put together meals and filled our freezer. And that was a game changer, especially when we were going back and forth to the NICU. Like all I needed to do was grab it, put it in the bag. And I knew that was like one less thing I had to worry about. And it was just automatized for me. That's a positive part of automatized, right? So suggesting doing a postpartum doula or even chef, that is fantastic. And to me, that's not a luxury. That is an absolute necessity. I put red lights on here. That was something I used after my vaginal birth, because holy cow, it was so helpful when I was very swollen and literally just laying in bed, boobs out. I literally had that right in front of my vagina, just healing and doing all the good things. This was also really great for nighttime feeds. We just got like light bulbs, I'm staring at one right now that has a red light in it. Super fantastic for that. And actually making a plan for postpartum. We always make a plan for the hospital bag. We also should be packing a snack bag, in my opinion. That should be like whatever your birth setup is, if you're going to a hospital, if you're going to a birth center, if you're at home, knowing who is feeding you, checking in, having visitor boundaries, those are all huge, and heavy on the visitor boundaries piece because I was someone who needed that for sure after we came back. Logging off of social media, I know some of you might make some money on social media, but this is the time to completely be in that newborn bubble phase. I think I took personally 2 months off of social media and it was so good for my heart and soul, and it felt really nice. Chest freezers, push present. This was something that I did that was fantastic. I think it's kind of funny, at least in the US, we have like all these kitschy things like, I have a push present and it's this new mom car. And while that might be nice, some of us might not be able to afford that. And a chest freezer is fantastic because this is going to feed your family forever. And even when your kids are grown up, this is still going to be something that you are always going to use. One of the bonuses that you'll all get at the end of this is access to my postpartum checklist that is really nice to have on hand. And there's some freebies and really nice codes in there for you all. I'm going to get into my 4 pillars for Well-fed Mama Method. So first and foremost, nourishment, rest and recovery, movement and breath, and emotional and hormonal landscape. So the first one I want to touch on is nourishment. So postpartum nourishment is a little bit different than your average quote unquote health. Even I am a board certified nutritionist. This was completely different from what I learned in school. And it's fantastic because there's a time and place for certain health things. So as you can see here, I listed out 4 pillars within this. So it's fully cooked, simple ingredients, rich in protein and fat, and warm in temperature and food. One of the most overlooked things when it comes to postpartum nourishment and health is that our digestion changes after birth for a brief period. Our body just spent months growing a human. We labored and welcomed them into Earthside, and now it is time to replenish ourselves so that we can show up. So this is where you can also pack your own meals depending on where your birth is and everything, like I said earlier. So our digestion slows as a natural response to birth. And think of it as your body going into an energy conservation. This is a normal physiological response because even if you had like the picture perfect, amazing birth, it is still technically a trauma to our body, and our body is shifting its energy reserves. So there's an element of trauma and inflammation, acute inflammation specifically to our body. So think of a time when, your digestion or even your appetite might have dipped or slowed down. It could be moving to a new space, a breakup, a stressful job, stressful life. And that's when our bodies are in fight or flight. So blood is prioritized to central systems, and digestion is kind of taking a back seat at this moment. So instead of asking your body in postpartum to break down a really cold kale smoothie or an ice cold smoothie, shifting it into something that is warm and soft and easy to digest. And I know some of you might be thinking, well, what if I'm giving birth in the summertime or the springtime or the fall? This is actually something I am working on, developing a book that is specific to birthing in the 4 seasons while also following these 4 simple pillars right here. So when we're eating like this in postpartum, we're going to support our healing by making it easier to digest and freeing up that energy for repair. It's going to also encourage adequate milk supply because I think that's not talked about enough. Half the time we're not actually eating enough when our milk supply takes a hit. And I know that everybody's different, but we need to be eating enough. This is not the time to diet or restrict yourself whatsoever. And this is also where that first part, postpartum poop, gets a bad rap. I know we've probably all had this conversation, and please comment if this is something that you've heard from family or friends or personally have gone through, having a really awful time doing your first postpartum poop. And I get that everyone's situation can be different, but this is a huge piece that is missed. Depending on where you give birth, you're not given real food right away that is easy to digest. Me personally, I had hot porridge, a herbal bath drawn for me, and women just like flocking around me, taking care of me. It was absolute bliss. And I think that should be the same for every single woman. Um, this is just going to be a better situation for your first postpartum poop and also your rear end. So you're not getting anything funky down there. I know we all know what that is. I also noted here for traditional Chinese medicine. So warmth is going to support that blood flow, digestion, and then really deep healing. This is also really great for when we're going through our 4 phases of our cycle as well. When we're bleeding, really good to have warming, nourishing things like this, just the same. So rest and recovery. No more bounce back. Lindsey referred to this at the beginning. There's no bouncing back. Flowing forward, welcoming, flourishing, feeling really good in this phase. So our culture seems to glorify the bounce back, posting pictures, again, referencing to social media, posting pictures of doing chores or errands or workouts 2 weeks postpartum as if it's some badge of honor. And I know that is very bold of me to say, but it doesn't matter how great of an athlete you are, how many times you've given birth. Grant yourself the grace to rest. Like, who cares what Karen down the street is doing in postpartum? You need to be focused on you, because the rest period now does affect you months and potentially even years later, especially when it comes to injury prevention. Rest is productive in postpartum. And I noted on here, because I think we all need to know this, but our nervous system thrives when we can stay regulated. And what does that regulation mean during this time? It is rest, it is recovery. It is, again, setting those boundaries to visitors, how you want your postpartum set up. It's the most strategic investment, rest is, in your future self. So taking the time and allowing yourself to do this and setting this up before baby comes, I think, is also very huge. So movement. I'm sure Lindsey has talked about this, but these are kind of my pillars. Obviously, BIRTHFIT Basics is in here. But the 5-5-5 rule, and I also added sunshine. So 5-5-5 rule is 5 days in bed, 5 days on the bed, 5 days near the bed. And I know that might sound crazy, but keeping it simple or similar to this, plus adding in sunshine, is going to be fantastic for both you and baby. You're resting, you're allowing yourself to recover, and you're getting that circadian rhythm started with baby. Breath work. We all know how important this is. And again, relating it back to a regulated nervous system, we forget about breathing. I think we romanticize that first breath when we come into the world and that last breath we take when we leave this planet. But we forget the in between, which is the everyday life, which is us being able to drive through traffic without gripping the steering wheel or clenching your jaw. I know I'm guilty of doing that sometimes, jaw clenching, and that is directly related, we know, to our pelvic floor. So how do we regulate ourselves, feel good, come back to center when you're in those early days, you're sleepy, you've got milk flowing out of your boobs, you're in a diaper potentially. That breath allows you to come back to center and know that you are exactly where you need to be at this time. And the key thing with movement is building that foundation. So that starts with the breath. It's not going to a group fitness class 2, 4, 6 weeks postpartum. I know some of us might get quote unquote cleared at 6 weeks, but they're not checking on your pelvic floor. They're not also checking in on your replenishment. If you're depleted in nutrients, that can do more harm than good. So working with someone outside of a 6-week checkup, however that may look for you, is super important. And I'm going to talk a little about healing timelines in a little bit here and kind of break that down right here. So this I created because I thought it was interesting how we're all talking about 6 weeks postpartum. Oh, I can have sex again. I can do this again. I can move my body again. Maybe it could also be different for everyone. So on the bottom here, I've got everything from vaginal birth, cesarean, pelvic floor, uterus minerals, and hormones. And on the left-hand side, these numbers are all in months. And mind you, these are all averages, okay? So I'm just sharing this because I don't think this is talked about enough as far as what an actual healing timeline can look after you have baby. And this could be your first, second, third, fourth baby. It all depends on where you're starting before you conceive. So vaginal birth, average recovery time, 3 months potentially. Cesarean internally, up to 12 months. External, 2 months for cesarean. Our pelvic floor, average recovery time around 8 months. Our uterus, average time could take maybe up to 2 months. Our minerals, recovery time potentially up to 18 months. And then our hormones, around 12 months, so a year. And I mean, look at this. If we added all these up, this would be close to a few years, which I know sounds like a lot, but when we're thinking about where we started before we tried to conceive, during pregnancy, how we were feeling our body, how we were feeling, how we were moving, and then into postpartum, it's a domino effect. So it matters before you try to conceive, during pregnancy, and postpartum. And if you are trying to conceive again after having baby one, two, or three, however that looks like for you, knowing that you can take the time to look at these things and understand that you can change how you feel. If your first pregnancy, you were struggling in the first trimester with nausea, low energy, etc., this can be changed when you go to the second pregnancy by focusing on these key things, and especially minerals right here, which I'm going to break down in a little bit. So I'm going to tie in some emotional and hormonal landscape here with all of these for postpartum depression, or is it postpartum depletion? So our early postpartum period is truly a hormonal roller coaster. So estrogen and progesterone are dropping while prolactin and oxytocin rise, and then cortisol is just fluctuating. So it's literally like we're on a roller coaster, especially in those early weeks. We just gave birth. We've gone through a lot of really amazing things. And knowing the difference between mood shifts and something that could be actual postpartum depression. It's also an identity transition here. So you're transitioning, and it's almost, I would say, an ego death in a way from maidenhood to motherhood. You're still the same amazing person. You've just leveled up even more, and give yourself grace and welcome that new person that you've become in. So some of the common struggles that can happen that are more so depletion versus depression. So feeling a little bit isolated. This is where you ask for help. This is where you reach out to your community, feeling touched out, and wondering if you're doing enough or right, especially that first go round. I can remember wondering, man, is this how this is supposed to be? And when I found out truly, with breastfeeding especially, that it was a learned experience versus it being biological, because we learn by seeing. There's some amazing studies on this with actually orangutans who are in captivity at zoos, where they learned to breastfeed because breastfeeding mothers came in and did it in front of them, and then they learned in turn. So the same thing is happening for us humans. This is where that modern day village is so, so important. So depletion versus depression. So depletion, I've got some common ones listed here. And in the middle, you can see all of these different symptoms. And some of us may have experienced these even before pregnancy. So low energy, brain fog, irritability that might improve with rest or nourishment, versus depression side of things. So persistent sadness, hopelessness, anxiety, intrusive thoughts that don't ease. This is where you invite someone safe to talk to. This is where you also could do something like an HTMA test to truly understand if this is depletion when you're six weeks, 12 weeks postpartum. See what this is. An HTMA is a hair tissue mineral analysis test. This is something that I'm actually doing in my practice now. One of my friends does this, and I think this is a huge key pillar to understanding what is actually going on in postpartum, because we all know all of these foods are real foods right here, but we're not eating enough of those, especially in preconception and pregnancy phase. So if we're not doing that during those times, this is going to domino effect into postpartum piece. So common mineral deficiencies. Common does not always equal normal. I try not to say that myself as far as this is a common symptom because we all know common doesn't equal normal. And this is something that I also think stems from any of us who have known or have gone through being on birth control. This is like the birth control piece for pregnancy and postpartum. Understanding that not all of us want to go on birth control. That 6-week appointment, that is what they will also offer up is, do you want to go on any options of birth control versus checking in, do you use the FAM method? How are you feeling overall? How is your support from your husband or partner or family? This is where we can make some really good active choices in this realm. I have some more talks. I wanted to talk a little bit about informed choices here for a second because I think that we all come from different setups and know that what is standard isn't always supportive. So understanding and knowing that you can have different options, you can work with different people, you can also fire people that you've worked with during your birth and even your postpartum phase. In my humble opinion, if we could paint the perfect picture for postpartum when it comes outside of that 6-week appointment, is fourth trimester is technically the first 12 weeks. It's actually a really good book to check out, fourth trimester. And understanding that we're going through all these different changes and we just want support as women. We don't want online support. We don't want to be doom scrolling. We want in-person support, understanding these are the kinds of foods I need to be eating. This is the kind of support that I need to be able to feel good in postpartum versus having a terrible experience. I feel like my own friend group is divided in half of having a really good postpartum experience versus not so great. And the ones that had a really good postpartum experience are the ones that prepared for postpartum ahead of time, had these conversations while they were pregnant. Because in birth classes, they're not offering this information up. They're not talking about lactation. They're not talking about how to breastfeed, what that looks like. They're not talking about nutrition. And after baby's born, I've shown up to some births that the food that was offered was pudding cups, Jello cups, and popsicles. That is not a meal for postpartum or truly for anybody, if we think about it, especially anybody who has been sick or in the hospital or is going through a lot of different life changes. So this is where all of these amazing foods come into play. And on the left-hand side here, I just want you to take into account some of these. So we've got potassium. Sodium's not on here, but sodium, potassium, magnesium. These three are what we're going to
Can
find.
I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
The PowerPoint stopped showing, so we're stuck on the
I am so sorry.
No,
Okay.
we're stuck on the
Like,
postpartum depression depletion with the iron, magnesium, calcium. So
okay.
maybe just stop sharing and try to reshare.
Okay. Let's see.
That happens sometimes on Zoom.
Easy going.
Sometimes we just need a reset.
Totally.
I was like, wait a sec, this isn't lining up.
Let me just take it out of the presentation mode really quick.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Okay. 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 We should still technically be on this slide.
Okay.
So, okay. Sorry about that.
Right. Hopefully we get it now.
Okay. Before I open up things to questions, I just wanted to finish this thought for a moment. But in regards to all of these vitamins and minerals here on the left, these are the top 6 most common that we are actually depleted in. And this is where testing can be really great, but this is where doctors and physicians, even midwives, are not having this conversation. So I wanted to quick touch on, so potassium, magnesium, sodium. We all know that those 3 are all always in electrolytes. And the one that always kind of gets the back seat, for me at least, is potassium. So this one is so amazing. This was something that I started taking when I was a runner growing up. And I didn't realize how amazing this would be throughout all different chapters, and especially in postpartum. And potassium, when women have lower potassium, this is usually associated with even things like in postpartum, these listed, but also hair loss, because we always see something about hair loss. And there's always going to be supplements that people are pushing. I feel like I predicted this a few years ago when it came to postpartum support. And a supplement is not going to solve all your issues in postpartum. I'm sorry to report that. That's just the hard truth. And if you see somebody advertising like this is the end all be all before saying, here's the foundations, this is how we should be eating at least the first 6 weeks, those 4 pillars when it comes to eating. So nutrient dense, warm foods, high in protein and fat, super simple ingredients. So nothing like too crazy as far as spices and stuff, but some warming spices. This is where you should be starting, is absolute foundations. And some of these foods on the right, some of us might not eat sardines. My kid and I really like sardines. My husband is like, absolutely not. Coconut water. This is a really great one to be including. All of these are also going to be key foods in preconception and then during pregnancy as well. One of my favorite books, I actually have it right on my desk here, but Real Food for Fertility and Real Food for Pregnancy by Dr. Lily Nichols. She is absolutely fantastic. And she kind of, I feel like, pioneered and started some of the food and even sharing out studies, because most studies done on women, they weren't started actually until 1993, which ironically was the year that I was born. And it feels like we're playing catch up, but we don't need all these different studies to prove to us what we've already known, which is real food will always trump supplements and all these other things. Because without a good foundation, you're basically just throwing money away or paying for really expensive pee when you're taking certain supplements. So having a very good foundation. And when it comes to postpartum meals, something I wanted to share is that the 4, I'm going to go back so that we can have a little visual, because I'm the same way with that. So these 4 pillars right here, I'm from the Midwest, and while I love it there, the food is not always the best. So instead of just putting a fill the freezer party and telling anyone to bring whatever food, following these guidelines, getting some good books where we're not doing a casserole. Like the Midwest, a casserole is about 50% cheese and like 50% carbs. Cheese is going to be really hard to digest in those early weeks. So waiting at least the first 6 weeks, if you can, to add in even potentially dairy or gluten. Some of us might be fine, but those can be inflammatory in some instances and make it a little bit harder. And I know some of you may be thinking, but I really love like my morning tea or coffee. You can slowly add it in. Just maybe wait a little bit, especially that first week postpartum, because our digestion is just going all over the place. So supporting it with nutrient-rich foods. Some easy things would be congee. So that is usually made with rice or oats, and you stew it very low for a long time. And then you can add in different things. You could make it savory. You could add meats to it. You could do stewed fruits or veggies even. And this is where, when I pointed out not raw salads or not raw fruit, it doesn't mean that you can't have those things, but have them cooked, have them implemented into things as far as you consuming them, because they have really good vitamins and minerals in them. But we want to make sure that they are cooked. So if somebody offers you smoothies, you can kindly say, can you actually make me this instead? Because this would be more beneficial to me. And it's not that you can't have those things ever again. It's just that for that little period, we want to be having fully cooked, warm in temperature, rich in protein and fat. And one more thing I wanted to point out with healing timelines, because I think this can be kind of an interesting conversation. So, labor and birth medications, whatever you choose to do, being truly informed in how these can play a role in your healing timelines and also postpartum depression or depletion. Um, there are studies, and I think we all maybe innately know this, but when we're putting synthetic things into our bodies, just like birth control, right? We've got all these studies now that say, oh, anything that's mimicking your actual hormones is actually going to bring on symptoms of depression, of anxiety, of XYZ. It's the same thing when it comes to birth and labor medications and being properly informed, asking these questions, doing your own research and due diligence of knowing synthetic oxytocin. What could that possibly do to you, especially in early postpartum? These are not questions that they're asking, especially at 6 week appointment. They're not telling you that when they're offering it. So having those conversations, this is also where having a doula can be fantastic. Fantastic. Asking these questions, knowing what is going into your body and understanding the potential repercussions. It's not to say like you're terrible if you chose to do this as a mother. No, it's are you informed? Because the biggest thing that we are doing is dropping the ball on women when it comes to birth preferences and choices and being truly informed. And then postpartum, being informed, having actual care and support, because we all know that it can be hard sometimes and everyone's situation is different. But knowing things like that can potentially be contributing to signs and symptoms of postpartum depression or even potentially depletion. I'm going to pause and I'm going to open up the question floor. If I don't know if anybody comes off mute, Lindsey, I can also check the chat, but please feel free to do so if you want to come off mute and ask questions or make comments.
Perfect. Yeah, y'all feel free to unmute yourself, throw them in the chat box if you're in a place where you can't chat or use your voice. I did have one question over here that appeared as far as what would you do to, how would you go about getting an HTMA? Do you offer HTMAs or do you recommend anyone right now?
Yes. So in my practice, I have somebody do it for me. And they send out the test for you. So HTMA, you'll cut some of your hair. I promise it's not a lot. I actually just did one and I'm going over my results almost 2 years postpartum later this week to see where I'm at, which I'm very curious about. But yes, that is something that I offer. I feel like there's a decent community that offers it. And HTMA is going to give you a bigger insight and up to 6 months, kind of looking back at where your body has been, what you've been going through or fluctuating through. It's going to show that in the test versus blood work. It's like very instantaneous. It's not giving you a lot of insight into why, because I think we all know that Function Health, for example, it's really great that they're offering something for $500 as far as blood work, but those normal levels, those ranges vary for every single person. It's not looking at each individual's health history as well. So I think that's where that comes up a little bit short, but you can also work with someone who does HTMA testing to have them look at those and give you your optimal so you can see where you need to improve upon.
Mackenzie, do
Yeah.
you recommend an HTMA like what seasons, like during pregnancy or just preconception
Yes.
and postpartum?
I love that question. So I think it would be really great. You could even do a three-parter. So before you're even trying to conceive, so that you and your partner getting one so that you're at optimal levels for preconception, so that you both know you can rule out anything like that. Because that's not something that a conversation, a doctor's office, or if somebody's trying to suggest like IVF, etc., they're not going to offer those things. So taking precedence, doing that preconception during pregnancy can be fantastic. Um, Especially if you really wanted to, you could do each trimester, but I think at least once, kind of like in that midpoint before you go into third trimester, because our iron and some other levels
Yeah.
generally do drop in that third trimester. So understanding how you can fuel your body differently and then add supplementation after that. That's a place where I think supplementation can be good for an individual. And with HTMA, you can get individualized, basically like your own uh, multivitamin so that it actually has good things in it versus, as we all know, most multivitamins or prenatals are just fluff on the market.
Is there, well, I'm gonna piggyback on this question. Are there vitamins, like if somebody were like, I want a prenatal,
Yeah.
is there brands that you like?
Yes. So, ironically, very similar to your business name, but Birthright. I
I
really
love
like
them.
theirs. They're fantastic because it's a whole food supplement. So, it's not going to have things like folic acid. Folic acid is not going to go into anyone's system, and especially if you have the MTHFR, aka the motherfucker gene, that's not, that's just going to go through your system. You're just going to be, like I said earlier, peeing out expensive supplements. I like that it's a whole food supplement. You're going to be able to absorb all that into your body. Uh, don't quote me on this, but I just did some research for a client recently on some prenatals, and I think Needed has a decent one. I just always avoid if they have folic acid because it's not going to do anyone any good. And some of the more popular ones, like Ritual, or I'm trying to think of some of the other ones, but some of those have vitamins and minerals that actually counteract each other. So you're not actually getting that like daily intake of them. And those are all just, recommended daily intake. Those vary per person. So that's why I like a whole food one because you're going to absorb what you need and the rest just
Right.
goes through your system. So you're
We
able to do
just got a, gosh, what is her name? Megan of Fertile, Be Fertile.
that.
She's
Yeah,
awesome. And we just got there in our shop, there's a discount code if anybody wants it. And like you, I think that's where I lean now more over, prenatal, because that's what I did in my pregnancy,
absolutely.
was build my own
Yeah.
prenatal.
Yeah.
But
There's
like,
a few other things, and I would be curious to hear your thought on this, Lindsay, as far as like other things outside of a prenatal. I took Body Bio PC
yes,
because it is absolutely fantastic. So they sent me some stuff when I was pregnant before they've been around forever. I think
they're great.
it's like third generation now, but
Yeah.
the Body Bio PC is fantastic. And fun thing about that for like during pregnancy but after is that whole mom brain concept. It's your body depleted in essential fats. So you
Yeah.
need something like Body Bio PC to replenish so that you're able to be cognizant and heal and everything. But that was something I took as well during pregnancy and into postpartum. I take it diligently now. And then my son actually takes it now as well.
Yeah, so is
Choline,
Vera.
yeah. Choline can be great, but we obviously know eggs, first and foremost, great source, but adding a little bit extra can be fantastic during pregnancy. Um, because that they have like I think they just came out, it's like caviar level as far as a fish oil
Yeah.
from Body Bio. That is also fantastic to be taking as well.
Okay.
And I think making sure whatever you're taking during pregnancy, continue to take it into postpartum. That's like your new holy grail. And then if you do something like an HTMA test, then you might add in some other things. But as we all know, it's a season. I'm just diligent about certain things because I'm still breastfeeding, and
Yep.
I notice if I'm not on top of it and I miss a few days in any way, it definitely affects me, affects my supply as well.
Absolutely. I would say, yeah, like you said, continue on. Somebody wrote in here, heart and soil prenatal stack.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
They're they're real food too.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a few different options, which is fantastic because I don't think that that was the case like 10, 15 years ago. There was like maybe a few
they're
prenatals on the
garbage.
market. Yeah, it was just absolute garbage. Just it's basic. It's funny because prenatal vitamin is a multivitamin. They just slapped prenatal on it
Yes.
and
Yes.
called it good. So understanding what ingredients those are, and just sticking with it because I think that can be a really hard thing too, not getting too lost in the sauce when it comes to supplements. Stick with what works for you. Don't look at like what every Tom, Dick, and Harry is doing
Yeah.
on social media as far as like there's this
Influencers,
new
yeah.
one, this one. Because it's kind
Yeah.
of the Wild West out there. I try to be very um sparing sparingly with like what I share out because I understand like also cost of things is not in
Yeah.
everybody's budget. So keeping it very simple, as we said before, like foundations, this is going to be your first, layer of defense when it comes to actually taking a prenatal is your food and then
Yeah.
supplementing on top of it because our soil levels are just depleted now. We're not having the same amount of minerals and such in our foods. It can be, regenerative, grass fed, all those different things. But we still need a little bit of supplementation nowadays, which is not a bad thing, but just understanding and using discernment as far as who you're choosing to get your information from. And this is where working with someone can just be fantastic, make it easy, and be less of a headache.
Yeah. I agree 1000%. Like you could spend hundreds, thousands of dollars on supplements, but if you're not, if you don't have the foundations, it's not gonna, it's like you said, expensive pee.
Yeah,
Um,
it's very expensive. And it's just funny because I can remember, joining, I think, Instagram in 2014, and there was nothing like it is today. And it's overwhelming even for someone who's been in the health field. I mean, I go on and I'm like, holy cow, you're just inundated with information. So I think that's where, when we're in this amazing phase of pregnancy and then entering into postpartum, taking a break and just like using the resources that you have and having active conversations. That can be a mom group, that can be what we're in right now. But being able to share that information and having that version of a modern day village, I think trumps anyone influencer wise, even me as a nutritionist. Like, I never want to be the end all be all, and everyone needs to be doing their own research and being their own detective with what they're
love
taking.
it. Um, I love that. Okay, so I got another question for you, but I wanted to add one thing because you were talking about the influencers and their recommendations. Like
Yeah.
there was a season where Needed was getting pushed a ton and Ritual was getting pushed
Yes.
a ton.
Yeah.
Y'all, one thing, and I haven't looked and done a comparison lately, but I used to have a chart where I compared um all the hot prenatal vitamins out there, like even Thorne and Metagenics and stuff.
Yes.
Um, because Metagenics does packets. And I'll go ahead and say this, I won't make Mac the bad guy, but if you're getting a prenatal packet from an OB, it's probably garbage. Um, but if it has iron in it, I don't love it because as you touched on, our iron naturally goes down in the third trimester. And this is a whole nother rabbit hole that we can go down and I can
Yeah.
some podcasts, but we're not going to go down it right now. It's naturally supposed to go down. So if you're taking a prenatal vitamin with iron in it, your body is, just kind of like doesn't know what to do with all that extra iron. Um, so just make note of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Amanda asked here, where do you land on the copper discussion? Well, there we go. The iron and copper
yes,
discussion.
yes. Um,
um, yeah, go ahead. You can answer that if you want.
Well, I wanted to riff off of you for a second with that, with iron, because I was technically, quote unquote, diagnosed. I ran competitively in college and I lost my period for 6 months. I wasn't on birth control or anything, and I knew deep down something was off. My mom actually taught me the FAM method because she was raised Catholic, and that's actually something that they do, which is kind of hilarious that we're like now full circle doing this as a society. It's awesome. But I remember being given these iron pills, and I swear they were, I'm probably exaggerating, but they felt like they were this big, like 2 inches big. And I always felt like it was just a gut bomb for me.
Yeah.
And we need to be eating our iron. And you can do things like even cast iron pans, really great to cook with, great source of iron. They also have these like iron fish. They're literally like shaped like little fish you can put into like soups, stews, whatever you're cooking. And it naturally brings out iron. It's not going to give you like heavy metals or anything, I promise. But it's literally a cast iron fish that you can cook with as well. And
That's
having these conversations because, yes, like you said, the OBs, whatever they're giving, they're likely being paid or have samples because that's just like an endless supply. And it's the same thing with formula or anything else. They're just going to have samples and they're going to inundate you with whatever it is. They're not really supporting your choice as an individual. It's just like, all right, assembly line this. How can we get through this as quickly as possible?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Somebody submitted a question. It's not on here. Oh, let me hit this one that's present. Are there any specific mineral deficiency links to postpartum hair loss? I know you talked about potassium.
Potassium can be one. And I'm actually going to be sharing probably on my social in the next week or so my results from my HTMA and having it broken down a little bit. Just because I didn't have a ton of hair loss. I had like a little here, but that's all grown back now. And the thing I noticed, which is so interesting, being like 3, 4 months postpartum, that's when it happened. But then I started getting hit up by like companies or brands advertising like if you're experiencing postpartum
Yes.
hair loss, blah, blah, blah. It was like an infomercial, but potassium can be linked to hair loss, and that is um, a really, really important one to have in our system. I feel like a lot of times, like when I was talking about electrolytes, a lot of electrolytes are actually lower on the potassium level, and we want it to be more of like a 1 to 1 to 1 ratio. So this is where like I will personally get I like coconut water, and I know not everybody does, but coconut water has a lot of potassium. I think it's like 625 milligrams.
Mhm.
We need like double the daily amount in postpartum, just in general, but especially for breastfeeding to be able to replenish that. So, this is a really easy way. Bananas, potatoes here. I personally love potatoes. Aloe leaf juice also is very high in potassium. If you don't like the taste of coconut water, you could kind of like make your own drink concoction. But potassium is one that is linked to postpartum hair loss. Um, and I don't think it's talked about enough because people want to offer out scalp things, not naming any names. I think we all know what it is. Like you do you, but it's more than just using something topically. You have to be ingesting something as well and understanding like what all of these do. And this is like on a basic level, symptoms that can come up. I should have put potential hair loss right here, but we're talking about it now. So that is one to look into that can be really, really great to understand and see that on your HTMA test.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then protein wise,
Yeah.
this has been a big question. I know we need protein. Is there a certain number you aim for postpartum?
Oh gosh.
Like, what can you give insight on protein and
Yeah.
postpartum?
So protein and postpartum. I say this with love. Like I love protein, but I don't need to I don't want to do every single recipe with cottage cheese. Like if I want ice cream, I just want some ice cream. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's this phase I feel like we're in. We cycle through it. Sweet
yeah.
potatoes were like 5 or 6 years ago, but protein is huge. So starting like how you're building your plate postpartum, however that may look, but like whatever meat you're kind of looking at, starting your plate with that. There's always like the old school, like the size of your fist as
Yeah.
far as like protein, which I think is just a fun thing. I personally usually aim like 120 to 150, but
Oh,
I'm also not beating myself up and like trying to chug something at the end of bed. Um, as I see that with, like get ready with me or what I eat in a day. And it's not always realistic for everyone, but I think if you lead your day with that, however your breakfast may look, and you don't always have to do breakfast food. Like I'm someone who likes to switch it up, and like the other morning I made like lamb chops, and so I heated those on a pan with my son. We had like that, and I made my like little special coffee drink, which I do an egg yolk, heavy cream, dash of Wisconsin maple syrup because that's truly the best. I'm biased, and then my coffee. Like I whip that up and add it, and then I did have some cottage cheese with peaches, but that's like a whole different scenario versus like everything is with cottage cheese now, I swear.
yeah.
So designing it with that and eating in season, I think is a fun way too to mix it up. But I usually aim, it's like I know like Dr. Stacy Sims has done this and, broken it down, but whatever feels best to you, like just keep doing it. And if you notice you're hungry at the end of the day, do something that leads with a little more protein. We don't want to ever do like naked carbs and stuff. So that would be my advice in 2 cents is like look at your body weight. I think every woman at a minimum should have 100 to 120 grams of protein a day, which is actually a lot easier than it sounds. And maybe even 150. I feel like I'm more in that phase of closer to 120 to 150 right now, just because I'm working out harder and I'm towards the end of my breastfeeding phase.
Mm.
So I don't feel like I'm doing as many carbs when
Yeah, yeah.
I was at the beginning of, postpartum and breastfeeding. But that would be my 2 cents is yes, we want to have protein. We also want to like mix all these other things in here. Like I even put for magnesium, pumpkin seeds, oysters,
Yeah.
sardines. Like you could do some of that might not sound appetizing to everyone, but like sardines on a really good like gluten-free cracker, or if
Love
you
it.
make homemade sourdough. I have not entered the sourdough phase. My baking needs some work, but you could do something like that, like instead of a tuna melt, sardine melt or something like
Yeah.
that. Have fun with it. It doesn't have to be this like strict thing where it's and it lead with real food protein versus like protein bars or even protein powder. I do use a protein powder that I like that's very clean, but I'm not like it's not like the era of Quest bars, if anyone remembers those. I can remember my roommate like warming it up in the microwave
Oh,
as her breakfast. So
oh.
we've grown past that. These sound more appetizing over here. Like steak and eggs is a great option. Yeah.
Oh, and okay, you touched on, I'm piggybacking on questions here.
Yeah.
You touched on your breastfeeding journey and
Yeah.
how your diet has changed a little bit. Can you share a little bit more and like what weaning looks like right now for you?
Oh yeah. So it's funny because I initially had to pump because Leo had oxygen in his nose, which
Hmm.
made it really hard to latch. So I would have to pump after a few feeds and then do like exercises on his mouth. Uh,
Okay.
and that was really hard for my first 2 months. I feel like
Yeah.
I had some really great meals for like the first 2 months from like the freezer. And then I had another friend who did a meal train. So it was like double duty and it was absolutely amazing. Um,
Oh,
and I feel like so I specifically chose to do this and it was so good for me, but I did bone broth and meat stock. So meat stock, I'll quick touch on the differences between those two. Bone broth might not be good for everybody, especially if you have histamine issues, or it might be underlying, because I feel like in postpartum, sometimes that can happen. Like 1 in 3 of us, quote unquote, develop a autoimmune disorder in postpartum, and that's where this eating piece can be huge. And that'll be more in one of my freebies as well, a little bit a further breakdown of all of this information and more as far as how to eat and how to have that ideal setup for postpartum. But I did meat stock, so that is cooked long. That's cooked slower, and you're not roasting the bones beforehand. And then you're free. I froze it right away. It's very delicious and it's even like more gelatinous. I feel like it's like literally if it was in this jar, it's like jelly when it cools, which is really good. I had that every single day, my first 12 weeks of postpartum, which was great. But I feel like now, as I have, it's been 22 and a half months of breastfeeding, which is amazing. And I'm so proud
yeah.
of Leo
Congrats.
and I. I feel like I'm doing even more protein, a little less carbs, just naturally, not to like quote unquote diet. I never dieted. And I've never been someone to count macros or anything. That's just personally not my jam. You could potentially do that if you really wanted to. But the biggest thing for me was like getting enough in my system and like getting my calories higher in that initial first like 12 weeks because the hanger was just like real. So I had like snack stations, which would be like beef sticks, or I would make these like protein balls with some sort of really good nut butter, etc. Sipping on broth, having little like snacks with homemade like ghee granola. I love making that and then putting it with yogurt and some berries. That was like a really good snack. And I still do those things, but I don't have as much energy expenditure when it comes to the amount of calories that Leo's taking now. He's maybe feeding like not really overnight, but it's right before bedtime and then early in the morning and then maybe two other times. So four total versus probably eight or nine initially when we first started. Um, and my weaning process, so we traveled quite a bit this past month, July. We were gone like 3 weeks out of the full month, which was a lot, but it was fantastic. We road tripped for 2 weeks, saw my family, celebrated my amazing mother-in-law 70th. I feel so lucky to like adore my mother-in-law because I know that's not the case for everybody. But I started to notice a decline then.
Okay.
Um, and it was very interesting because I've had my cycle consistently since 6 months, like to a T. I'm going through all four phases. I'm really proud of that. And I know that's because I worked on my cycle before conception. And it can take some time. Like your hormones can play a role, and even depletion in these can play a role in when your period comes back postpartum. And I actually did a post on this, I think maybe last week or this week on ovulation and postpartum. So you can actually ovulate before you get your first period back. And that's why breastfeeding is not a tool as far as birth control because we're
Mhm.
ovulating before we actually bleed. So that's when you can potentially get pregnant, even before you get your first cycle back. But I've noticed I've been like emotional, just like crying wise a little bit and even some warmth at night. So I was like, my liver's communicating to me because I've woken up a few times around that 2 to 3 a.m. mark. In Chinese medicine, you can look
Mhm.
this up, but they have clocks and it goes through all the different organs. But our liver takes a toll. And our hormones are starting to fluctuate, just like I talked about earlier with postpartum. Similar thing is going on as you're weaning. Because if you think about it, if you've been doing it for X amount of months or over a year, you're just like at this steady timeline and then it's slowly dwindling down. So I'm doing castor oil packs a few times a week. I'm not doing any detox things. I don't agree with that, especially fellow practitioners that I've seen that are trying to do like detox while breastfeeding because baby can get the
Mhm.
after effects of that. So like nothing like a coffee enema or anything crazy like that. I'm doing dandelion root tea. That's a really good natural supporter. Dandelions aren't weeds; they're actually really good for us. But I'm drinking that a few times a week, like slowly doing that versus like coffee or matcha. Um, and honestly, as funny as it sounds, having conversations with my toddler of just like, he calls them my boo boos. So having conversations of like, okay, boo boos are not producing as much. We're going to have this instead, or we're going to go outside and play or something versus it being like, I always want to, I want to be his comfort, but I also know like we're both on this journey together and it's dwindling. Um,
Mhm.
I'm probably more emotional than he is, but I actually called my mom the other day and just like talked for an hour, and she breastfed all of us between 2 years to 2.5 years. I think two of us were closer to 2.5, and she was like, "You are doing amazing," and she's like, "You have a toddler now." That is the hardest concept, as silly as it sounds, is that huge transition of it's not my baby anymore, will forever be my child, but he is now a toddler and he is, expressing himself and being this big, amazing character in life. Um,
Yeah.
that's how I'm supporting myself, making sure that I'm eating enough too, because sometimes I've noticed my appetite's a little off. So I'm like, okay, I need to make sure I'm narrowing in on this, especially with weaning. And if I'm feeling any nausea or anything, drinking enough, even increasing my potassium and magnesium intake. Lots of magnesium soaked baths as well, because that's one of the best ways for us to get magnesium since so many of us are depleted. That can be a really good tool for postpartum is magnesium flakes, either doing a bath or if you have rips or anything, doing it a magnesium foot bath because then your body's going to be able to absorb it. It'll pee out what it doesn't need. But that's been my go-to the past few weeks is like on repeat those things. And I feel it's been really helpful for me. I've been sleeping amazing, so has my son. But I don't think it's talked about enough is the weaning piece. That's like a
Yeah.
whole other chapter that can be really raw and emotional because it's truly the end of an era. Um, and I'm going to have a break before we try to conceive again. My husband is doing some health work right now. Super proud of him for doing that and kind of diving deeper into his health. I'm going to find out my HTMA this week, and then proceed forward for like the next probably 6 months, before we are both at a good baseline before we try to conceive. Just because that was a big thing for us always. And before we had Leo, we both went through some stuff. Like I have a history of parasites and mold back in the day before it was like very mainstream. Um, and I think that truly set me up for success. And then our son as well, because he's a big boy. The other day somebody asked me, oh, is he 3 or 4? And I was like, no, he's 2 months away from being 2. So I was kind of proud of that. He's very tall, but he's just like strong.
Yeah.
He's a well-fed kid, if you will.
Yeah.
So
Well fed, eh?
yeah.
Um, Camille asked, she was doing a snack and electrolytes during the night. She's 8 weeks postpartum, by the way. But the
Okay.
last few weeks, she hasn't wanted it because she's falling back to sleep right after nursing. Any thoughts one way or another on that?
Okay, so just so I understand this, so historically you've been kind of having a routine of electrolytes and a snack, and now you're not feeling that anymore.
Yeah, it sounds like she's going right back to sleep after nursing.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally fine. If you're not feeling as hungry anymore, it means you're kind of evening out.
Mm.
And I wouldn't worry about it too much as far as like if you're curious about staying hydrated enough and then replenishment, getting enough calories in, you can always do that later on in the morning and just have a really hearty breakfast. Because I know that I personally tapered off like midnight snacks, if you will, while
Yeah.
breastfeeding. It was around that time because our breast milk kind of starts evening out. Our body starts to know what to produce between 12 to 16 weeks, and then it starts to get less and less. So you're not like waking up with those like orbs. I know we've all probably been there or will be there where it's just like that painful, that starts to go away. So you should be totally fine. Just have a really hearty breakfast. And that's definitely, I feel like all of us kind of go through that phase of dwindling off that little midnight snack time after breastfeeding. And I'm glad you're going back to sleep right away. That's huge.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
huge.
Yeah.
I have a random question, and then I
Yeah.
mean, if anybody else, I know we're running over, and I'll let you go. But do like, okay, so I'm almost 2 years breastfeeding,
Yeah.
and I feel like there's no depletion of my supply at all.
That's
So,
amazing.
well, I'm wondering when we're gonna wean because
Totally.
when,
I feel the same way. It's kind of interesting because I think there's a lot of conversation of like, last week was World Breastfeeding Week, and
Mhm.
less than 25% of women in the US are actually getting past 6 months. It's
I
like
saw
that
that
six
stat.
month
That's
mark. And
crazy.
it's sad in the sense of like if it's your personal choice, I fully support you. But if it's not because you are going back to work or you're, God forbid, your like partner or something, hopefully nobody married a loser here, but like somebody who's like, you need to stop breastfeeding now,
Yeah,
stuff like that, or even friends or family, it's like it's nobody else's business but your own. That's actually normal that your supply is just doing its thing continually. Um, because I know you can like after you wean, it can kind of still store
mm,
your body for like 1 to 2 months after, but you're not going to get like I personally don't get engorged if I'm doing something longer, like if I go for a hike with a friend solo or like mountain
yeah,
bike or something, which is kind of a nice thing because you're like, oh, we're both on this trajectory of like they're getting more independent and so are we.
yep,
It's amazing, but also recognizing like, yeah, you can still have milk for a very
mhm.
long time, which is amazing. And I mean, that's probably why back in the day we had success with wet nurses. I don't
Right,
think that's
right.
talked about enough. Like a lot of other countries and cultures do that. They will have wet nurses if somebody's on foot traveling to another village, which is absolutely
Cool.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool. Okay. Anyone else have any other questions? I know we've kept Mac on here a little longer. Good questions.
totally fine.
Yeah, tell
Just wanna
us
say
what's going on here.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for today and for everyone who is here. But this QR code is going to take you to a little form that will allow you to get the information that I promised earlier. I'm going to be sending that over to you all. And then on the right here, you can find my website, my Instagram, and then my emails to reach me. But it's been such an honor, and I hope you all came away with a little something that you maybe didn't know and just feel seen and heard and understand that you can flourish before, during, and after pregnancy as a woman, and that everyone who is here today is also in your corner, right?
Mm.
We're all either moms or about to be moms, and what a wonderful thing that Lindsey's created, not only BirthFit, but now BirthFit Blueprint of creating a modern day village that has been missing, that is so needed for so many of us that might not live close to family anymore. And family doesn't have to be blood, it can be your next door neighbor or your fellow mama.
Well, thank you so much, Mac. Thanks for
Thank
hanging out
you.
with us.
Absolutely.
Y'all definitely check her out
Yeah.
on social website. It's Well-fed Momma, and Mama is MOMMA,
Yes.
and then method.com. And thanks everybody for hanging out.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Bye, y'all. Enjoy the rest of your week.